My name is Helen Gracewood. I'm 68 years old. I used to teach second grade. Now, I grow tomatoes. I read. And I go days without speaking more than 5 words. Not because I'm lonely, because I've learned silence can do what shouting never could. But today, in this moment, I had to speak. "What are you doing here? You were uninvited yesterday," the bride hissed, right there, in the middle of the ballroom I paid for. She didn't whisper it. She didn't pull me aside. She performed it, as if humiliating the mother of the groom was part of the program. All eyes turned to me. I stood still, just a soft black dress, a silver hairpin holding up my thinning curls, and the purse I've carried for years. No makeup, no corsage, no seat at the table. But I was the one who paid for the chairs. I looked her in the eye and said, "I'm leaving. But first, meet my guest." I turned to the door behind me and gave a small nod. When he stepped in, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. His name is Jack Rivera. And the moment she saw him, she dropped her champagne. The glass shattered, loud and sharp against the marble. Her hand flew to her mouth, but it was too late. Her body betrayed her. That's when the room froze, like we all inhaled and forgot how to breathe out. You probably think I ruined my son's wedding. You're not wrong, but you're also not right. See, there are things a mother knows before the rest of the world catches up. And there are times when stepping aside feels easier. But easier isn't the same as right. 6 months ago, my son Andrew brought Emery home for dinner. She wore a soft blue dress and carried lavender shortbread cookies. She called me Mama H before dessert. She laughed at my husband's old jokes, even though he's been gone 15 years. And I was hungry for warmth. I let my guard down. I gave her the pearls that have been in my family for 4 generations. The ones I saved for Andrew's bride. I didn't know. I was feeding a wolf. 3 weeks ago, I heard her call my son a mark. I heard her tell someone named Dante that I was just a desperate old bat who'd do anything to be called grandma. She laughed, and something inside me broke, but not in the way you think. It didn't break like a cup falling from the counter. It broke like a lock. Quiet. Click. And when that lock opened, all the softness I'd lived by became a strategy. I didn't confront her. I didn't cry to my son. I didn't beg for my place at a wedding I was paying for. I made calls. I contacted an old friend who works in quiet places. And I found Jack. He had photos, emails, receipts. He had a heart that still twitched when he said her name. And he had no idea she'd changed her face and found a new fool. Until I told him. When I walked into that ballroom, I wasn't looking for a fight. I was looking for a reckoning. And when she dropped that glass, it wasn't the sound that satisfied me. It was the stillness. It was the way every smile in the room tightened. It was the moment my son turned to her and didn't know what to believe. "You think I should have stayed home? Let them get married in peace? Let me ask you something. If someone put a beautiful mask on poison, would you smile, raise your glass, and toast? Or would you lift the mask?" That day, I lifted it, with one sentence, and one guest. What happened next? Well, let me start from the beginning, and you tell me if I was wrong. 6 months earlier, it was just a quiet Thursday when Andrew first brought her home. I remember the light was soft that day, coming through the kitchen window like it didn't want to intrude. I had just taken a pie out of the oven, apple, cinnamon, and a little nutmeg, the way he liked it since he was 10. He always said store-bought tasted hollow. I was wiping my hands on a dish towel when the door opened, And there she was, Emery, soft-spoken, hands folded in front of her like she didn't quite know where to put them. She wore a pale blue dress, simple but elegant, and her hair was pulled back with a clip that caught the sunlight like it had secrets to keep. "Hi," she said, smiling. "I'm Emery. I've heard so much about you." I smiled too. He's told me just enough to make me curious. She laughed, and I admit, it was lovely. The kind of laugh that made you want to join in before you even heard the joke. Andrew was glowing beside her, like a boy showing off a perfect drawing to his teacher. That boyish pride in his eyes. And well, I melted faster than the butter on the pie. At the dinner table, she complimented everything. The china, the pie, the crocheted runner that had belonged to my mother. But what I remember most was what she didn't do. She didn't check her phone. She didn't interrupt. She didn't brag or overshare. She asked about me, my years teaching, my favorite books, whether I'd ever thought about traveling. She seemed genuinely interested in the small, forgotten corners of my life, places no one had asked about in a long time. I was caught off guard by how easy she was to talk to. Somewhere between dessert and coffee, she looked at me with those soft eyes and said, "You know, I never really had a mother. Mine left when I was little. Foster homes mostly. Good people, but not family." I didn't speak right away. I watched her run her finger along the edge of her plate, not nervously, just absent-minded, like the memory was far away and only partly hers. Andrew reached for her hand under the table. "I guess what I'm trying to say," she added with a smile that could soften granite, "is that being here tonight feels more like home than anywhere I've ever been." She reached into her purse, pulled out a small glass jar of cookies, lavender shortbread. "I baked these. I wasn't sure what you'd like, but I wanted to bring something." Something in me opened, not all at once, but like a door you didn't realize had been closed until it creaked and let in light. Later that night, after they left, I stood at the mirror, brushing my hair. I looked at the silver hairpin on the vanity, an old piece my husband gave me on our anniversary 30 years ago. Nothing fancy, just tarnished silver and a clasp that stuck sometimes. But it had held my hair through funerals and Christmases. Through all the seasons, I didn't think I'd survive. And that night, I picked it up, turned it over in my hand, and whispered, "She might be the one." Over the next few weeks, Emery and I grew close. She texted me photos of wedding dresses and fabric swatches, asked my opinion about table runners and flower colors, invited me to lunch and listened when I talked about Andrew's childhood. She always asked, always, about his favorite foods, favorite colors, favorite songs growing up. Said she wanted to understand all the layers. Once, she reached over at the farmer's market and gently straightened the silver hairpin that was slipping from my bun. "I love this," she said. "It feels like something passed down." I smiled, hand brushing hers. "It is," I said. And in that moment, a thought bloomed, that maybe, just maybe, I was gaining a daughter. But now, looking back, it's strange how easy it is to mistake attention for affection, how hunger for connection can blur the shape of a person right in front of you. I didn't know it yet, but that soft blue dress, those warm cookies, even her kind eyes, they were part of a performance. And I was sitting front row, applauding. It didn't happen all at once. No lightning bolt, no shouting, no red flags waving wildly in my face. Just small, quiet things that sat wrong. like a jigsaw puzzle where the pieces almost fit. Almost. The first time I noticed it, we were at brunch. Emery was talking about her childhood again. This time, she said she grew up in Connecticut with her grandmother. But 2 weeks earlier, she had told me she was raised in Nevada. Foster homes, she'd said. Lots of moving around. So I asked lightly, was that before or after you lived in Connecticut? She blinked. A flicker of hesitation, then a smile. Oh, you've got a good memory. I meant after. My grandma took me in after the system. It was complicated. She reached for her mimosa. Andrew didn't notice a thing. He was too busy cutting her pancakes just the way she liked. There were more moments like that. Little inconsistencies. She said she was allergic to shellfish, but ordered lobster ravioli at dinner. She claimed she didn't drink coffee, then posted a latte art photo on Instagram with the caption, "Morning Essentials." She said she had a younger brother. Then later, she said she was an only child. Each one, small enough to brush off, small enough to call memory slips. But together, they scratched at the back of my mind like a pebble in your shoe. One you don't stop walking for, but never forget is there. And I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to become that mother, the one who can't let go, the one who sees ghosts in every shadow. Andrew was happy. That mattered more to me than anything. After years of watching him drift through birthdays and holidays with a quiet ache behind his smile, he finally seemed alive again, engaged, anchored. He'd call me just to tell me she made him laugh, or that she learned how to cook his favorite lasagna, just like I used to. "Mom, she gets me," he said once, voice soft. "It's like she sees the parts of me no one ever cared to." And I said, "That's all I ever wanted for you." But I hung up with a strange hollow in my chest. One night, after dinner at their place, I offered to help clean up. Emery insisted I sit, but I followed her into the kitchen anyway. There, on the fridge, were 2 sticky notes. One said, "Call bank, REI joint account paperwork." The other, "Reminder, auto insurance beneficiary update." I stared at them for a second too long. She saw me. "Oh, those," she laughed. "We've been organizing everything before the wedding. Adulting is exhausting." She spoke with that same warm smile. But there was something behind it this time, a calculation. I found myself retreating inward, second-guessing everything. Was I being paranoid? Was I just not ready to share Andrew with someone else? Had the years of being alone made me suspicious of kindness? After all, Emery hadn't done anything wrong. Not really. Just blurred edges, like a painting that's beautiful from a distance, until you get close and see the brush strokes don't match. I journaled about it. I baked more. I cleaned out closets that didn't need cleaning. I told myself I was imagining things. When Andrew came over, I watched him. He was radiant, laughing more, less guarded. And when he called me Mama, in that same playful tone Emery did, I felt the sting of displacement, like I was becoming a character in someone else's life. Still, I didn't say anything. Every time I opened my mouth to mention something, a voice in my head whispered, "What if you're wrong? What if this is just you struggling to let go?" And the truth is, I was struggling. Not because Emery was taking him away, but because I couldn't tell whether she was real or simply convincing. I wore the silver hairpin every Sunday we had dinner together, a small anchor, a quiet reminder of who I was, of who he'd been, of what mothers see when no one's looking. But still, I smiled, and the trap, I realized later, wasn't hers. It was mine. A smiling trap built from my own silence. A place where love and fear held hands and said nothing at all. The call came on a Monday afternoon. I was steeping a new blend, rosehip and ginger. It smelled like something you'd drink while waiting for difficult news. The phone buzzed twice before I answered. "Hey, Mom," Andrew said. His voice was casual, but I heard the hesitation underneath, that extra pause between words. The breath held a little too long. "Hey, sweetheart," I replied, smiling even though he couldn't see it. "Everything okay?" He cleared his throat. Yeah. Everything's fine. Just wedding stuff. You know." I stirred my tea clockwise. It's a habit I've had since college. Something about making small circles makes me feel in control of time. "We actually just got off a long call with the planner," he continued, "and Emery's feeling a little overwhelmed." I nodded, as if he could hear the movement. Planning a wedding's no small thing. Right, exactly. It's just a lot of moving pieces, a lot of emotions, and I guess some things are starting to feel a little tense. There it was, the opening line of a door I hadn't expected to see closed. My fingers tightened around the spoon, but I said nothing. He went on. "It's not you. I mean that. It's just, Emery thinks maybe it would be less stressful if you didn't come to the wedding." My spoon clinked against the side of the teacup. I lifted the cup slowly. The porcelain was warm, familiar, and then I noticed the thin crack running down its handle. I hadn't seen it before, but it was there. Hairline, almost invisible, just like this moment. "For everyone's peace," Andrew added, as if that explained the knife he'd just handed me. I let the silence breathe between us. I didn't ask why. I didn't demand justification, because in that moment, I realized something that hit harder than the words themselves. He didn't think I would say no. He already believed I would take the blow, quietly, gracefully, and step aside. He was right. I smiled into the phone. The kind of smile you use when you're teaching a child how to walk, and they fall face first, and you pretend not to panic so they won't cry. "That makes sense," I said gently. "This is her big day. I wouldn't want to add any pressure." Andrew exhaled, like I'd handed him permission to breathe. "Thanks, Mom. I knew you'd understand. I told her you would. You always do." I pressed the cup to my lips. It was too hot to drink, but I held it there anyway. "I'll be thinking of you," I said softly. "We'll send you tons of pictures," he promised. And that was the end of it. After the call, I placed the teacup down and watched the crack on the handle. I'd had that cup for over 20 years. My husband bought it for me at a yard sale. A silly gift for no reason. "For your poetry mornings," he'd said. It had survived a house move, 2 floods, and being dropped once during a fire drill at school. But now it had cracked from nothing at all. Just heat and time. I picked it up again, turned it in my hand. The crack didn't make it useless, but it made it different. Fragile in a way it hadn't been before. I thought about calling Celeste. I thought about packing a bag and going somewhere. Anywhere. Instead, I opened a blank notebook and wrote one sentence. "I've raised him to trust wolves." Then I closed it. That night, I made dinner for one. I set the table with a napkin and a glass of wine. I even lit a candle. Because sometimes you have to remind yourself you still belong somewhere, even if it's just at your own table. When I went to bed, I placed the cracked teacup on my nightstand. Not to fix it, not to throw it away, but to remember. Things break quietly, too. The pie was still warm when I wrapped it in foil, apple and brown sugar, with a crumble crust. Andrew's favorite. I hadn't told them I was coming. I just needed to feel like a mother again, the kind that shows up at her son's door with something homemade. No agenda, no accusation, just cinnamon and care. I remember checking my reflection in the hall mirror before I left. My hair was pinned up with the silver hairpin. My lipstick, soft rose. A small touch of blush. Nothing fancy, just presentable. I wanted to look like someone they'd be happy to see. The drive over was quiet. No music. Just tires on pavement and my thoughts trying not to pick at the same bruise over and over again. Maybe I had overreacted about being uninvited. Maybe I was holding too tightly. Maybe the distance I felt wasn't their fault. Maybe I just hadn't caught up to the changes. I told myself I'd only stay a minute. Drop off the pie, say hello, smile, leave. When I reached the porch, the front door was slightly ajar. I knocked gently. No answer. I called out, "It's just me." Still nothing. I pushed the door open. The living room was empty, shoes near the rug, a jacket tossed over the banister, the quiet hum of a dishwasher. It felt lived in, cozy, safe. Then I heard her voice, Emery, on the phone, somewhere down the hall, muffled at first, but as I stepped inside, it became clearer. "Listen, Dante, I told you. Stop calling me at this number. He's in the shower." I froze. I said I've got it under control. He's not suspicious. He's practically begging to be used. My body went cold. Of course he added me to his account. He thinks I'm planning our future. He's the easiest mark I've ever had. There was a pause, then laughter. Her laughter. No, she's not a problem. She thinks I'm some poor orphan craving a mother. That old bat baked me a pie last week. I nearly choked on the cinnamon. My hand tightened around the pie dish. My breath caught in my throat. I just have to keep playing sweet until the wedding. After that, I'll steer him wherever I want. Then we cash out. Another laugh. "Oh, and Dante? The pearls? Real. Antique. She gave them to me. Probably thinks I'll pass them on to our imaginary kids someday." I didn't hear what came next. I couldn't. I stepped back as silently as I could. My heels made no sound on the rug. In the kitchen, I placed the pie on the counter. Carefully. Precisely. I didn't unwrap it. I didn't leave a note. I just stood there for a moment, looking at it. Steam was still rising through the foil. It smelled like home. But it didn't belong here. As I walked out the door, the air hit me like a slap. Not because it was cold, but because I was awake now. Like someone had thrown a glass of water in my face and said, "Look, really look." In the car, I sat with my hands gripping the steering wheel. The weight of the betrayal hadn't landed fully yet. It was still circling, like a hawk waiting for the right moment to strike. I couldn't cry. I couldn't speak. I just stared at the windshield, my eyes unfocused, and let the engine idle. Then I drove 3 blocks and pulled over. That's when the shaking started. My arms, my chest, my breath. It wasn't just the lies. It was the performance, the effortlessness with which she had twisted everything I had offered in love and turned it into leverage. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts until I saw the name. Celeste Marin. Retired. Private investigator. Former detective. Old friend. The last person who ever made me feel like I wasn't crazy for trusting my gut. I didn't call her right then. I just stared at the name. My thumb hovered over it. I whispered to no one. She played me. Then I whispered again. Not anymore. I drove home with both windows cracked. The wind tangled my hair and chilled my skin. But I didn't roll them up. I wanted to feel something real. When I got home, I made tea. The cracked cup. I didn't replace it. I placed it on the table and sat across from it like it might tell me what to do next. Because now, I wasn't just a mother watching from the outside. I was a mother who had heard the plan. And the pie I left behind? It was the last thing I ever baked for someone who didn't see me as a person. It took me 3 days to dial the number. I kept opening my contacts, staring at the name, Celeste Marin, then locking the phone again. Not because I didn't trust her, but because calling her made it real. It meant admitting I'd been wrong about Emery. It meant this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a con. And I'd been the mark, just like Andrew. When I finally hit call, it was late, almost midnight. But Celeste answered on the second ring, her voice clear and alert as ever. Didn't expect to see your name this late. You all right, Helen? I let out a breath. No, I said. Not really. We met at a small-town charity fundraiser in our 30s, both widows by then. Both used to being underestimated. She had a wicked sense of humor and a mind like a steel trap. Back then, she was a detective with the sheriff's department. Later, she went private. We'd stayed in touch over the years. Christmas cards, occasional lunches. But this wasn't a social call. I need a favor, I said. Tell me. It's about Emery. I could hear the rustle of her sheets as she sat up. What about her? She's not who she says she is. I overheard a phone call to a man named Dante. She called Andrew an easy mark. Mocked me. Said she's got access to his accounts. That she's steering him. Celeste didn't say anything for a moment. Then, I'm coming over in the morning. She showed up at 8:04 sharp. No makeup. Hair tied back. Wearing jeans, boots, and a leather jacket I hadn't seen since 1997. I work best on coffee, she said, walking past me like it was her house. And full disclosure, I already ran a quick scan on the name Emery. Nothing popped up, which is already a red flag. I poured the coffee. I don't know what to do, I admitted. Celeste sipped, then looked at me over the rim of the mug. You called me. That's doing something. She pulled out her tablet and opened a file. Let's start with everything you do know. Full name. Where she said she was from. Work history. Anything. I told her what I could remember. It wasn't much. Emery had always deflected. She was between jobs. Said her parents died in a car crash when she was 19. Moved around a lot. Worked briefly at a nonprofit. No social media presence. No photos of family. Celeste shook her head. All too clean. Classic, classic? She leaned back. My daughter's fiancé, a decade ago. Same story. No family, no past. Claimed he worked overseas in development. Nothing verifiable. He love-bombed her, got access to her bank accounts, and vanished 2 weeks before the wedding. I stared at her. You never told me that. Celeste shrugged. It's not exactly something you brag about. Did you find him? I found what was left. A trail of aliases. Open warrants. He'd done it before. Probably did it again. I said nothing. She reached across the table and touched my hand. I'm telling you this so you know. I don't think you're crazy. Or overreacting. Predators pick people who feel, who believe in second chances. In goodness, they pick people like your son, and like you. We spent the next hour combing through emails, text snippets, anything I had. Celeste asked questions I hadn't thought to ask. Why was Emery always just there? How had she met Andrew? Why was there never a friend or coworker around her? She's a professional, Celeste said. Not just manipulative, strategic, the kind who studies her prey. The word prey made my skin crawl. As Celeste stood to leave, she looked back at me. You okay if I dig a little deeper? Discreetly, of course. If I turn up something ugly, you want the truth? I nodded once. I'd rather lose the illusion than watch my son lose everything. Celeste gave me a half smile. I'll be in touch. That evening, I sat in my garden with my tea. Same cracked cup. Wind in the trees. The faint hum of distant traffic. I thought about Celeste's daughter. The wedding that never was. The pain she must have felt. But I also thought about how lucky she was to have had a mother who saw the storm before it hit. Maybe I was too late. Maybe not. But now I had help. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel alone. Celeste came back 2 days later, unannounced. She didn't knock. Just walked in and placed a manila folder on my kitchen counter like she was setting down a loaded gun. She's not Emery, she said quietly. I didn't ask her to sit. I didn't offer tea. I just stood there. Celeste opened the folder. Her real name is Nadia Hale, born in Kansas under that name. No record of her legally changing it. But she's gone by at least 5 aliases since she turned 21. She flipped through documents like she was turning pages in a funeral book. Nadia Hale, Mallory Sykes, Aaron Dent, Amanda Lee. And now, Emery Lark photos, ID's hotel receipts, a marriage license once annulled, a restraining order from a man in Arizona. She targets men with money but soft edges, isolates them, inserts herself into their lives fast. One of them was in the military. She pretended to be pregnant with his child for 3 months. I blinked once. She's a professional, no record of conviction, but a dozen closed cases. Settled, sealed, or dropped. She's slippery. Celeste finally looked at me. You want to stop here? I shook my head. She continued. There's a recurring name tied to some of the accounts she used. A Dante Levins, the man you heard her speaking to on the phone. I pulled his records too. She turned another page. He's a felon, wire fraud. Got out 3 years ago. They've been spotted together in Chicago and Reno. Celeste paused. She's not in love with your son, Helen. She's running a play. I didn't cry. I didn't fall into a chair or drop the pie dish in cinematic disbelief. I just stood still, listening. A part of me had already known. The moment I heard her voice say, "Easy, Mark," that was the funeral. This was just the burial. What's the end game? I asked. Celeste closed the folder. Marriage, legal access. Slowly separate Andrew from his friends. You, then full financial control, joint accounts, power of attorney if he's dumb enough. I exhaled sharply through my nose. He's not dumb. I know, Celeste said. Just in love. And love doesn't check LinkedIn. The clock ticked in the kitchen. I noticed the pie Celeste had brought, untouched on the counter. Cherry, her favorite. She must have baked it this morning, thinking it might soften the blow. It hadn't. I want every document, I said finally. You've got them. I mean soft copies, too. Celeste nodded. Already in your email. I picked up the folder, held it to my chest. Not out of sentiment, but as if it were armor. Is it wrong, I asked, that I don't feel sad? Celeste looked at me. Really looked. Number its clarity. That's what this is. It's just rare for it to come all at once. We sat down. She poured herself a cup of my tea this time. I was quiet for a while. Did your daughter ever forgive you? I asked. Celeste stirred her tea. She hated me for 2 years, didn't speak to me the entire time. Then she saw a new segment. A different man, different woman. Same story. She called me at midnight, crying. She smiled, but her eyes glistened. She said, "You saved me, Mom." Then hung up. It took another year for her to come home. I nodded. She's married now. Kids? Married, Celeste said. To a man who does have a mother. She jokes I trained her to sniff out the good ones. We both smiled. Then the smile faded. What do you want to do now? Celeste asked. I looked down at the folder, at Emery's face, or Nadia's, in a grainy DMV photo. I want to give him the truth, I said, but not just as a mother. As a woman who sees it clearly, who respects him enough to let him choose, once he's seen it for himself. Celeste nodded slowly. Then we'll give him that chance, with proof, without panic. As she left, she squeezed my shoulder. Call me if you need backup, she said. I won't need it, I replied. But thank you. I stood at the window after she drove off, watched the road disappear behind her, held the folder tighter. Outside, the wind stirred the leaves. Inside, everything was still, but not quiet, because inside me, something had shifted. Not anger, not grief. Readiness. Celeste called at 7:03 a.m., sharp. She never wasted time with pleasantries. I found him, Jack Rivera, lives 2 towns over, works at a marine supply shop, has a dog named Barney, divorced, no kids. She paused. Same Jack from the Arizona case, the one Nadia, Emery, claimed was abusive. I closed my eyes. She flipped it on him? Of course, Celeste said. That's her game. Hurt first, lie second, run third. I waited until noon to call him. It felt wrong to drag someone back into pain before he'd even had his coffee. But also, it felt necessary. He answered on the 3rd ring. His voice was gravelly, but alert. This is Jack. Hi, Jack. My name is Helen Whitmore. I know this is unexpected, but I think we have someone in common. A beat, then quieter. Let me guess. Her name now is Emery? Yes. He exhaled like he'd just taken a punch. We agreed to meet halfway, a public park bench across from a worn-out hardware store. Jack wore a faded, navy hoodie, jeans, and the kind of shoes that tell you a man walks a lot. A scar trailed from the side of his temple to behind his ear. He didn't offer his hand, just nodded and sat. You have a son, he said. Yes, Andrew. She's marrying him? In a week. He shook his head, slow and sorrowful. She told me she couldn't have kids, he said. Said I'd pushed her down the stairs when she told me she was pregnant. I believed her for a while. Even wondered if I had done it. Blackout rage or something. That's what she does. She gets in your head, rewrites the parts of you you thought were good. His voice cracked, then steadied. She stole $48,000, cleaned me out, said it was for fertility treatments. I took out loans, sold my boat. I listened, didn't interrupt. Let the words sit between us like coals, glowing but untouchable. She left a note on the fridge. He continued. Said I was too broken to be loved. He looked at me. You look like you bake. Am I right? I blinked, startled, then nodded. I do. She made a pie once, blueberry, my favorite. I thought it was love. Turns out it was just bait. We sat in silence for a long moment. Then I reached into my purse and handed him the folder. the same one Celeste had given me. He didn't open it, just placed it on the bench beside him like it was too heavy to hold. "She call your son Baby Duck?" he asked suddenly. I frowned. "Yes. She said it was an inside joke." Jack snorted. "She called me that too." He wiped his face. "She's got a pattern." I cleared my throat. "I didn't call you to reopen wounds, but I thought maybe you'd want to say in stopping her from doing it again." His gaze sharpened. "Are you planning something?" "I'm planning the truth," I said, delivered with eyes wide open. No screaming, no drama, just sunlight. Jack nodded. Then, "You want me to talk to your son?" "No," I said. "Not yet. I want you to be in the room when he sees the truth. If he still doesn't believe, maybe then you speak, but only if you're ready." He looked away, jaw working, then slowly nodded. "I'll come." As we stood, he looked at me sideways. "You're calmer than I expected." "I've already done the crying," I said. "Now it's about protecting him, whether he thanks me for it or not." Jack gave a half smile. Not joyful, just respectful. "There's strength in knowing," he said. "Yes," I replied, "even if it costs you everything else." He paused before turning. "Thanks for calling," he said. "Most people don't ask the ghosts if they want a second chance." He left without taking the folder. I picked it up and held it close. It smelled faintly of printer ink and lemon, Celeste's office scent. As I drove home, I thought of the pie I hadn't baked, the hug I hadn't offered, the tears I hadn't cried. And I thought of Jack, another quiet casualty of a woman who knew how to smile and slice at the same time. But we weren't ghosts, not anymore. The pearl necklace around my throat felt heavier than usual. Not physically, but in the way memories can weigh you down, even when you're dressed in your best and walking with purpose. I had worn these pearls on my wedding day, on Andrew's first birthday, on the day we buried his father. And now, on the day I began unweaving the future I had once funded with hope, I stood at the kitchen table, the folder open beside me. Contracts, invoices, digital receipts. I had paid for nearly everything: the catering, the venue deposit, the florals, the officiant, even the string quartet Emery insisted on for ambiance. My name was on every transaction. But that was about to change. The calls were brief, professional, cold, if I'm being honest. "Yes, I'd like to update the billing contact on file." "No, this is not a cancellation, simply a reassignment of responsibility." "Yes, I understand the penalties." "No, I'm not interested in rescheduling." By noon, every major vendor had updated their files. A few required written confirmation. I sent those too, with a soft smile and a clearer mind than I'd had in weeks. By 2 p.m., Emery's email would begin to fill with new invoices, all marked due immediately. By 5 p.m., the credit card she once used, mine, of course, would be declined, deactivated, and shredded, the final act of financial severance. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I had once mistaken silence for peace. And now, I understood that sometimes the quietest actions speak the loudest. Later that day, I took a drive out to the cemetery. It wasn't a planned visit. My car simply turned toward the hill the way your hands find the old blanket in a storm. Reflex, not intention. The late August air was warm and breezy, the kind that wraps around your shoulders like an old friend. I parked beneath the oak tree we'd picked together years ago. His spot had a view of the valley, the wildflowers, the open sky. "Hey," I whispered, brushing leaves off the headstone. I knelt beside it, careful not to get dirt on my slacks. In my purse was a small velvet box, worn but clean. I opened it slowly, as if time had folded itself around the hinges. Inside were his cufflinks, gold-rimmed, oval-shaped, with tiny engraved initials. J.W. Jonathan had worn them on every big occasion. Interviews, christenings, dinner parties where we pretended we weren't tired from parenting. And, of course, our wedding. I had kept them all these years. They weren't worth much in dollars. But in memory, they were priceless. "I think you'd know what to do," I murmured. The wind picked up slightly, lifting the edges of my scarf. "She's not who she says she is," I then continued. "And Andrew, he's too deep in to see it clearly." I swallowed hard. But I saw. And now, I'm doing what I can. I placed the box gently against the headstone, tucking it where the grass met granite. It wasn't a dramatic goodbye, just a symbolic one. A gesture not for him, but for me. Because carrying it any longer, the fear, the doubt, the ache would only slow me down, and I needed to be sharp. As I stood to leave, I touched the stone one last time. My fingers lingered on his name. Jonathan Whitmore, beloved husband, loyal friend, steady light. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't asking for his permission. I was informing him of my plan and trusting he'd be proud. When I returned home, I sat down at the kitchen table and poured myself a cup of tea. The same cup from weeks ago, the one with the tiny crack along the rim. Still usable, still strong, just different. Like me. Tomorrow would come quickly, and so would the storm. But tonight, I let the silence sit beside me, not as an enemy, but as an old companion. Because sometimes the quietest shift is the most powerful of all. The morning of the wedding came quietly. No fanfare. No flurry of texts or schedules or corsages. Just a still house, the ticking of the kitchen clock, and the slow breath of a woman who had already grieved. I opened my closet and stood still for a moment. I passed over the satin blush blouse Emery once complimented. Too bright, too eager. I skipped the pale blue linen dress I'd bought in hopes of a sunny spring ceremony. My hand paused on the far right. The plain black dress. Knee-length. Wool blend. High neckline. The one I had worn to Jonathan's funeral. It didn't ask for attention. It carried quiet. I pulled it out and laid it on the bed. The next item was a silver hairpin. Slim. Understated. It had once belonged to my mother. A tiny crescent moon carved at the tip. Emery had noticed it during our first lunch. Such a timeless piece, she'd said, reaching across the table to touch it without asking. I hadn't worn it since. Today, I pinned it into my hair with calm hands and eyes that didn't flinch in the mirror. There was power in choosing what the world sees. Today, I wasn't dressing for their approval. I was dressing for memory and for control. Because even grief, if you hold it properly, can look like grace. My phone buzzed once, a text from the florist, one of the last vendors I'd spoken to. The message was brief. Bride's mother says invoice must be wrong, not in her name. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my contacts and tapped Andrew's name. He picked up on the third ring, his voice rushed but cheerful. "Hey, Mom, everything okay?" I smiled. Not because I felt like smiling, but because the sound of his voice still did something to me. Still brought back the image of a boy with skinned knees and mismatched socks. "I just wanted to say," I began slowly, "I won't be coming today." A pause. "Wait. What?" I inhaled softly. I decided to head to Savannah after all, for the weekend. I think some ocean air might do me good. It was the first time I'd lied to my son, and the lie felt soft, like a silk curtain between us. "Oh," he said. I thought you might." He didn't finish. "I wish you a beautiful ceremony," I said gently. "Truly." And then I added, "Tell Emery. I hope she gets everything she's earned." There was something about the way I said that. Even I heard the weight beneath the words. But Andrew didn't. He was too busy being grateful that I wasn't causing a scene. "Thanks, Mom. Really. I appreciate you understanding. It means a lot." We hung up, and I set the phone down on the table beside my keys. Then I sat for a moment, still dressed, still composed, and let the silence settle around me like a shawl. I wasn't going to Savannah. But Emery didn't know that. And Andrew wouldn't know. Not yet. In the stillness of that room, I rehearsed nothing. No speeches, no confrontations, no dramatic reveals. Just one simple truth I now carried like armor. They had built their illusion, but I had built the fuse. And as I slipped on my black heels, the same ones I wore when I said goodbye to the man who once protected this family, I whispered to myself, "This time, I do the protecting." The parking lot was already full when I arrived. Black cars, white cars. One champagne-colored Bentley I didn't recognize, probably hers. I didn't park near the entrance. I backed into a space near the side hedges, angled for a quick exit if needed. The chapel sat on the edge of a private estate, modern, with sharp glass architecture that made the surrounding trees look like they were watching. I waited 10 minutes in the car before stepping out. No one saw me. That was the plan. I chose the garden entrance, a side gate meant for staff or florists, still slightly ajar. The hinges creaked faintly, just enough to remind me. Every step forward would echo. I walked slowly along the stone path, shoes sinking slightly into the moss-lined edges. Overhead, the string quartet had just begun tuning. The long stroke of a cello, the hesitant trill of a violin. Guests were still filtering inside. Laughter, polite greetings, that high-pitched chatter women use when trying to prove they belong. I stayed hidden among the camellias. I could see the glass doors from where I stood. Wide open now, framed by white floral arches. Everything was crisp and symmetrical, not a petal out of place. They'd spared no expense, or rather, I hadn't. Rows of chairs were already full. Emery's family on one side, stiff and styled. Andrew's friends smiling and unaware. And there he was, my son, adjusting his cuff, standing at the altar in a tailored gray suit. Handsome, nervous, unaware. I slipped inside just before the music shifted. No one noticed. Not yet. The garden entrance opened into a narrow hallway behind the main ceremony room, separated by a row of marble pillars and sheer white curtains. I stood behind one, second from the back. From there, I could see everything, but no one could see me. It was like watching a stage from behind the velvet curtain. The officiant stepped forward. The room hushed. Someone in the front row whispered, "Here she comes." And then, the music changed again. That slow, swelling piano. The bride's cue. I held my breath, not because I was afraid, but because I didn't want even the sound of my breathing to interrupt the spectacle they had so carefully crafted. I watched as Emery appeared, framed perfectly between the twin doors, arm linked with a man I didn't know. He wore a black suit, his face professionally composed. I wondered how much he knew. She walked like someone who had been told her entire life that the world should pause when she entered. And it did. Phones rose silently. Guests smiled. Some blinked back tears. She passed the aisle, step by step, never once looking left, never once looking right. Just eyes locked on Andrew, who smiled at her the way sons smile when they still believe in everything. My hand brushed the pillar, cool to the touch. I wasn't trembling. Not anymore. Behind me, a breeze moved the garden curtain. A petal blew in, landing near my shoe. Soft pink, fragrant, like the ones Emery had insisted on for the bouquets. I stepped over it. The moment was approaching, and I was exactly where I needed to be. Not in the crowd, not in the way, but watching, listening, waiting. The music swelled again, but this time, I didn't look at the guests. I didn't even glance at Andrew. My eyes were on her. Emery. She was halfway down the aisle now, gliding like smoke in that $12,000 Vera Wang dress. Layers of ivory organza shimmered as she moved, expensive, theatrical, and hollow. But it wasn't the dress that caught my breath. It was the necklace. My pearls. The very same strand that used to sit in the blue velvet box at the back of my dresser. The one I hadn't touched since my husband's funeral. The one I'd promised I would save for someone who truly understood what it meant to carry something old, something sacred. And there she was, wearing them like they were hers. I don't know when she took them. Maybe the day she helped me reorganize my closet. Maybe when she stayed over during that fake fight with Andrew, when she pretended to be vulnerable. All I know is she wore them deliberately. They weren't just jewelry. They were a message. She wanted to be seen. She wanted the world to believe that I had given them to her, given her approval, given her everything. I didn't move, didn't blink. My hands stayed tucked into the folds of my coat. I knew better than to disrupt a performance while the lead actress was still in her spotlight. At the altar, Andrew reached for her hand, and for a moment, I saw it. The small, almost invisible flinch before she smiled again. She turned it into a giggle, tilted her head just so, pressed her cheek to his shoulder. Camera shutters snapped. Guests sighed. It was all going according to script. The officiant stepped forward. He was young, mid-30s, with an eager, polished voice. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of..." I pulled my phone from my coat pocket. No one noticed. They were all watching the altar. I opened the message I had pre-written and hovered my thumb above the screen. I took one last look at her. The pearls gleamed under the glass chandelier, catching the light like frozen lies. She glanced over the crowd, so sure of herself, so certain this day would seal the story she'd written for herself. She didn't know the final chapter wasn't hers to write. I pressed send. Just one word. Now. Then I slipped the phone back into my pocket and leaned slightly against the pillar, heart steady. Outside, I could already hear a car engine rolling to a stop on the gravel. Inside, the officiant continued. Marriage is a bond built on truth. I almost smiled at that. Not bitter, just amused by the symmetry. Emery turned slightly, maybe sensing a shift. She scanned the room. Something in her spine stiffened, but she didn't break. Of course not. She'd trained herself to survive, smile, performance, win. Even if it meant using a dead woman's pearls to do it. A bead of sweat ran along Andrew's temple. He adjusted his collar, whispered something to her. She nodded and laughed again, a sound too bright, too crisp. The audience drank it in. Everyone was spellbound by the illusion. Everyone except me, and the man now walking up the garden path, Jack Rivera. He would be at the doors in less than 30 seconds. My heart didn't race. Not out of vengeance, not out of fear. just gravity. Like something long overdue was finally arriving. Like the balance of things was about to restore itself. The officiant's voice rang out again. If there is anyone who believes these two should not be joined in matrimony. And that was the last sentence anyone would hear before the crash. The heavy wooden doors swung open. No music, no announcement. Just the groan of hinges breaking the rhythm of a carefully orchestrated ceremony. Every head in the chapel turned, except mine. I didn't have to. I already knew who was coming. Jack Rivera walked in like a man who'd walked into many rooms like this before, but never one quite so personal. Black slacks, gray blazer, no tie, and in his hand a slim leather folder, scuffed at the edges but gripped with purpose. The officiant froze mid-sentence. Andrew blinked at Jack like he wasn't real. Emery. She turned slowly. Her smile faltered, only for a heartbeat, but it was enough. Enough for Jack to see it. Enough for me to know. She recognized him. He didn't need to shout, but he did. Nadia Hale! The name cracked through the chapel like a whip. Gasps. A ripple of confusion. Heads turned from Jack to the bride, back again. Even the florist near the altar dropped a rose bucket. Emery stood rooted, color draining from her face. The pearls at her neck suddenly seemed heavier. I'm sorry to interrupt, Jack continued, stepping further inside. But I couldn't let this wedding happen without the truth. Because that's not Emery Whitlock standing up there. He held up the folder. Inside were copies of documents, marriage licenses, arrest records, photos, everything Celeste had found and more. She's Nadia Hale, known con artist, has used 6 aliases across 3 states, and this isn't the first man she's tried to marry under a fake name. No one looked at me, and that's how I wanted it. This wasn't my battle to fight. It never was. I was just the woman who made the phone call. Emery stepped forward, voice tight but still clinging to control. I don't know who you are, but you need to leave. This is private. Do you want me to list the others, Nadia? Jack's voice was calm. Ben in Austin. Michael in Tampa. Should I keep going? She shook her head slightly, as if that alone could erase him. Andrew spoke for the first time. Wait, what is this? His voice cracked. What's happening? Jack turned to him, softened for a moment. I'm sorry, son. You don't know me, but I was you, 5 years ago. She almost got my family, my home, my identity. I got out with a warning. You might not. I watched Andrew closely. His fingers let go of hers, the smallest motion. But I saw it. The shift. I have no idea what he's talking about, Emery snapped, but her voice pitched higher, more shrill, less composed. He's clearly disturbed. Can someone get security? No one moved. The officiant stepped back. The guests stared at her now, not with admiration, but confusion, suspicion, doubt. Jack didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. He just placed the folder gently on the front pew and walked out. The silence he left behind felt like thunder. Emery stood alone at the altar now. No groom holding her hand, no guests applauding, just the echo of a name she thought she'd buried. I stayed hidden behind the pillar, still, composed. But inside, there was no celebration, only truth. Only the quiet hum of justice arriving not with sirens, but with documents and an open door. Andrew looked down, face ashen. He didn't speak to her, didn't yell, didn't cry. He just turned, walked down the steps, and out the same doors Jack had used. One guest entered, one son left, and the bride, still standing, still clutching stolen pearls that now felt like chains. The silence clung to the air like thick humidity. Emery stood frozen at the altar, pearls tight around her neck, her lips parted as if a lie had been halfway formed, then abandoned. Andrew had followed Jack halfway down the aisle before he stopped. He turned back. He didn't return to her. He stood midway, stuck between truth and the woman he thought he loved. I need you to tell me that's not true, Andrew said. His voice was soft, but I could hear the panic rising under every word. Please, Em, please tell me you're not Nadia Hale. Emery flinched. I told you, I have no idea who that man is, she said, arms spread in mock disbelief. He's insane, obsessed. I've never seen him before in my life. But he had paperwork, Andrew insisted. Photos, names, addresses. Photos can be faked, she snapped. Anyone can put together a folder and show up pretending to be a victim. You believe him over me? I could see the war inside my son. Logic battling love, embarrassment battling pride. And just when it seemed he might walk back toward her, her voice said something else, not from her mouth, but from Celeste's phone. Celeste stood at the very back of the room by the old wooden doors. She raised the phone high, tapped the screen, and let the audio play. It was quiet, but piercing. Honestly, I thought the old lady would have dropped dead already. You saw her limp, like a deer in headlights. I could snap my fingers and she'd sign anything. $92,000? That's a bargain. Emery's voice, clear, smirking, gasps. Chairs creaked. Someone dropped a bouquet. Andrew's face drained of color. Emery lunged forward. That's fake. Someone edited. Her son is pathetic. So eager to believe someone chose him. He's like a stray mutt. You feed it once and it follows you home. I'll get the house in 3 months max. Andrew staggered back as if slapped. He blinked. His lips moved, but no words came. His hands went to his temples, as if trying to rub away the sounds. The third clip played. After the wedding, we go straight to the notary. The power of attorney forms already in the folder. She thinks it's a bridal gift transfer. She won't know what hit her. That was the final nail. Emery turned. Her poise collapsed. No, that was taken out of context. She stepped toward Andrew. You said you loved me. You promised we'd build a life. He stared at her, still not speaking. But something inside him had fractured, visibly. The officiant quietly closed his binder. A guest stood up and walked out, then another, and another. Emery turned to face the room. Her mascara had begun to smudge, not from tears, but from panic sweat and rage. She scanned for me, but I had stepped back, just enough to be in the shadows. Her eyes locked on Celeste instead. You set me up, she hissed. You spied on me. Celeste didn't flinch. She only said one thing. You set yourself up. Andrew finally moved. He didn't yell, didn't throw the bouquet, didn't curse. He simply reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the ring, held it between thumb and forefinger like it was something foreign, unfamiliar, and then he let it drop to the floor. It bounced once on the marble, a sound louder than any scream. Emery stood alone now. Bride, dress, pearls, lies. The fantasy shattered, and in the ruin no one rushed in to save her. I didn't smile, not yet. Justice isn't about joy. Sometimes it's just the quiet removal of illusion, piece by piece, lie by lie. I thought nothing could follow the sound of that ring hitting marble. But then Jack raised his hand, slowly, deliberately, and tapped a final file on his phone. He looked at Andrew. Not at Emery, at my son. I wasn't going to play this, he said, voice low, but I think you deserve to know what your fiancé thinks about your family, about your mother. I felt my lungs lock. Jack pressed play. She's just a joke. The old bat's desperate for grandkids. Time did not stop. It sliced, right down the middle of the chapel, right through my son's spine, right through the floor beneath us all. The words echoed. Not because Jack replayed them, but because they didn't need to be repeated. They clung. They echoed in the quiet between heartbeats. I saw Andrew's body go still. He didn't gasp. He didn't speak. He just froze. His eyes moved slowly, as if replaying something he'd once brushed off, or tried to rationalize. Something he knew but hadn't let himself believe. He turned his head slightly, looking toward me. And that's when I felt it. The shift. Not pity, not guilt. Recognition. A man realizing he had handed a knife to someone and they used it. On the person who raised him. Emery broke the moment with a laugh that was more a bark. Oh, come on, she said. That is what breaks you? Not the audio? Not the fake paperwork? One little joke about your mommy? The crowd hadn't moved. The officiant had stepped aside entirely. Even the musicians at the side of the room sat rigid, hands off instruments, waiting to see what the next beat would be. Andrew's voice came out so soft I almost didn't hear it, but every syllable landed like a nail in wood. You called my mother a joke? That was the line, the point of no return. He said it without fury, without tears, just devastation. Like someone who finally looked at the house they built and realized every brick was made of wax. Emery scoffed. Oh, grow up. She's a grown woman who can't stop hovering like she's the center of the universe. Have some cake. Helen made it. Did you call your mom? We should invite her to the tasting. It's exhausting. That laugh again. Everyone knows she's obsessed with playing grandma. It's sad, honestly. A little desperate. I didn't flinch. I'd heard worse. Just not with so many people watching. Andrew's jaw flexed. He didn't speak. He just turned and walked. Not out the door, not to me, just forward. He stepped past her, past the altar, past the rows of eyes and judgment, and then he turned around, facing everyone, including me. My mother, he began, raised me alone after my dad passed. She worked nights and still showed up for every field trip. She packed lunches even when we barely had food. She saved money in envelopes labeled wedding long before I ever met you. He looked at her. I don't know who you thought you were marrying, but I promise you, he doesn't exist anymore. Then, and only then, he turned to me. Mom, he said quietly, I'm sorry for not seeing it sooner. My legs felt like sandbags, my throat raw. But I nodded, because the truth didn't need my voice to be real anymore. It stood on its own now, visible, unavoidable. Emery stood rooted, no more charm, no more bluff, just a girl in pearls, surrounded by the wreckage of her own invention. Jack tucked his phone away, said nothing. He had done what he came for. Celeste met my eyes from across the room and gave the smallest nod. Not triumph. Just resolution. That one sentence, you called my mother a joke, didn't need an answer, because the answer was standing in a torn veil and $12,000 worth of regret. And for once, I wasn't the one who needed to explain anything. Not anymore. I didn't plan on stepping forward. I had told myself I would stay silent, invisible. Just a shadow at the edge of the crowd, letting the truth speak for itself. But then it happened. Emery's eyes swept the room like a hunted animal, spinning toward the disruption, the stairs, the unraveling of everything she'd built. And then, her gaze locked on mine. A beat, a flicker. Then her finger pointed straight through the rows of guests, straight through the hush. "You!" she snapped, voice rising sharp over the silence. "You weren't even invited." I let the moment stretch. People turned. Eyes followed her outstretched hand until they found me, standing still beneath the archway of the side garden entrance. I took one breath, then I stepped forward, heel by heel, measured calm, like I wasn't walking into a battlefield, but returning to my own home, because in many ways, I was. "You lied," she spat, backing toward the altar. "You told Andrew you were going to Savannah." "I did," I said, stopping mid-aisle. And that was a lie. Gasps fluttered like paper wings. But what I didn't lie about was you. Her face twisted. Not rage, not shame, panic. Because now it wasn't just her lies falling. Apartment. It was her story. The one she thought she controlled. The one where I was the desperate old mother clinging to relevance. I looked at Andrew, whose face was pale, frozen. He didn't stop me, didn't move. And that silence gave me my answer. This was my moment now. "You know what's funny?" I said, letting my voice carry through the space without needing to raise it. All these years, I thought silence was strength, that letting things go meant I was being wise. I looked slowly across the room. But silence doesn't protect anyone when lies are allowed to grow in the empty spaces. Emery crossed her arms. "This is pathetic. You're just trying to make yourself the center of attention." I smiled, just slightly. "No, Emery. You tried to do that. With my pearls, my name on the checks, my son's affection." I looked her square in the eye. "I'm just here to take it back." A low murmur swept the crowd. It wasn't gasps this time. It was breath. Shifting. Energy redirecting. "You want attention?" I asked. "Fine. Here it is." I reached into my bag and pulled out the tiny leather folder I'd carried since the morning. Not legal documents. Not recordings. Just one printed email in color. I held it up. Face out. Andrew's head turned. It was the seating chart. The one Emery's planner had sent. The one where my name had been replaced with Grooms +1 TBD. No table, no plate, just a placeholder. "Even strangers were given better spots than me," I said calmly. "Because you didn't want me here. Not as a guest, not as family, not even as the woman who raised the groom." I looked directly at Andrew now. "You should have known. But you didn't want to." His throat bobbed, eyes darting from me to Emery, to the planner, to the floor, then back to me. And there it was again. That shift, that slow awareness that no matter how long you try to keep the pieces from falling, the moment they do, it's all yours to clean up. Emery stepped toward me, lips curled. "You just love being the martyr, don't you?" "No," I said simply. "I just stopped pretending I wasn't the target." I folded the email and placed it back in my purse. Not to use, just to remind. Then I took one final step closer. "Next time," I said softly, "don't underestimate the woman who stayed silent long enough to let you hang yourself with your own words." And with that, I turned and walked away. No need to raise my voice. No need to linger. Because for the first time in years, every eye in the room finally saw me. Not as Andrew's mother. Not as the bank account. Not as the burden. But as Helen Whitmore, the woman who had just reclaimed her name, her voice, and her place in the story. Emery didn't crumble the way I thought she might. She burned. "You'll regret this," she shrieked as I turned away. Her voice, once so carefully composed, now cracked through the chapel like glass breaking under pressure. I stopped halfway down the aisle, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to see what she'd do when no one stepped in to save her. Andrew finally found his voice. "Emery, stop!" She spun to him like a cornered animal. "You're taking her side? After everything I've done for you? What exactly have you done?" he said, louder now, his jaw tight. "Besides lie, manipulate, humiliate my mother." I watched from behind a row of chairs. No one intervened, not the wedding planner, not the bridesmaids, not the minister still awkwardly frozen mid-aisle with his book open. Emery threw her bouquet to the floor. "That woman doesn't care about you. She's just bitter and jealous." Andrew stepped between her and me. Number. She's my mother. She was at my baseball games when no one else came. She was there after every rejection letter, every fever, every time I failed. He turned to me. She never turned her back. My eyes welled up, but I held the tears still. This wasn't a moment for crying. It was a moment for witnessing. Quietly, steadily, because something deeper than vengeance was unfolding now. Something called justice. Jack took one slow step forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I already sent the files to the FBI," he said, clear as day. "Corporate fraud, falsified tax returns, identity manipulation, under both Nadia Hale and Emery Callahan. The paperwork traces back 5 years. Gasps again, but not the dramatic kind. These were sharp, sucked in through teeth. The sound people make when they realize they're in the presence of something real. Emery froze. Not the kind of freeze where you're caught in a lie and try to cover. The kind where you realize you're no longer the smartest person in the room. And never were. A tall man in a dark blazer stepped in from the vestibule. He wasn't part of the wedding. Neither was the woman in the navy suit behind him. They didn't need to flash badges. You could feel it in the way the air shifted. Calm, unyielding, federal. "Emery Callahan?" the man said firmly. She looked like she might run, but there was nowhere to go. White chairs, floral arch, and a chapel full of witnesses. "What is this?" she hissed. "This is a wedding." The agent nodded. "Yes, and now it's a crime scene." The woman agent gently took Emery's wrist. "This will be painless if you cooperate." That was when the screaming started. "I'm in a dress!" Emery shrieked. "You can't arrest a bride!" She clawed toward Andrew. Tell them this is a mistake. Andrew, please!" He didn't move. He just looked at her, and I'll never forget this. Not with rage or even pity, just disbelief. A man watching the illusion crack all the way through. Jack stepped beside me. He didn't say a word, just nodded once. His part was done. The agents walked her past me. Cuffed hands, torn veil, makeup running. Her eyes locked on mine for a second. It was almost a mirror of earlier. Except now, she wasn't pointing. She was pleading. But I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I didn't say a single thing. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is nothing at all. As they opened the chapel doors, sunlight flooded in behind her. The most beautiful light I'd seen all day. She stumbled into it and disappeared. I looked at Andrew, who stood surrounded by guests, none of whom knew what to do next. The flowers drooped. The cake sat untouched. The music had long since stopped. All that remained was the sound of truth settling into the room like dust after an explosion. And me, in the back, still holding the purse with the seating chart folded neatly inside. My voice was steady as I spoke. To those wondering if I came here to destroy a wedding, I said, turning to the guests who still stared. No. I came to stop a fraud. And then I walked out, leaving behind white petals on polished tile and a stunned silence that would ring louder than any vows ever could. There's a silence that only comes after the storm, a kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels heavy. The chapel was still full, but not in the way it had been an hour ago. No joy, no expectancy. Just guests sitting rigid in their pews like they were unsure if they'd witnessed a crime, a miracle, or something in between. Andrew stood alone under the arch. No bride, no music, no words, until he cleared his throat, and even that sounded foreign in the quiet room. "I thank you for coming today," he said. His voice cracked once before he steadied it. "I know many of you traveled from far away, gave up your weekend, rearranged your lives to celebrate with us." He swallowed hard. "But there won't be a wedding today." A few audible gasps. Someone in the third row whispered, "Oh my God." Andrew continued, "Emery is no longer someone I recognize, and that is not the foundation I want to build a life on." He held up the wedding band that was supposed to go on her finger. "I'd rather begin again with truth than continue with a lie." Someone clapped. A single clap. From a man near the back. Then a second. Then another. Until the entire room offered the gentlest applause I'd ever heard. It wasn't for show. It was respect. Respect for a man brave enough to stop a wedding instead of blindly walking into it. Andrew lifted his hand to quiet the room. "The reception has already been paid for. The food is made. The music is set. The hall is ready." He gave a small, exhausted nod. "You're welcome to join me there. No speeches, no dancing. Just thank you for being here, for seeing." No one moved right away. That's the thing about moments like this. People don't know the protocol for grace under fire, but slowly they rose, and they followed him out. Not because it was a party now, but because there was still dignity worth honoring. I didn't follow right away. I remained in the back pew, a ghost in my own son's ceremony. That wasn't. Jack leaned down beside me. He handled that well. I nodded. He's not perfect. He doesn't need to be. I took a long, steady breath. The air still held the faint scent of roses and panic. I looked at the now empty arch, the scattered petals, the scattered lives. Then I stood. At the reception, the band played low jazz instead of wedding ballads. Plates of food were passed around, but nobody took seconds. People spoke in hushed tones, as if they were attending a memorial instead of a celebration. In a way, they were. The death of a fantasy, the funeral of a lie. I stood near the back corner, beside the ice sculpture, melting into a puddle on the linen tablecloth. I didn't smile. I didn't drink. I didn't need to. I had already said everything I needed to by saying almost nothing at all. Andrew moved through the room, speaking quietly to relatives, shaking hands, hugging older aunts. He wasn't crying, but he wasn't faking strength either. He found me eventually. "Mom." He didn't say more at first. Neither did I. He just stood there beside me, like we used to stand on cold mornings before school, both waiting for the bus, neither of us speaking, but both knowing we'd be okay. "Thank you," he finally whispered, "for not pushing, for letting me see." I looked up at him. "You chose yourself today," I said quietly. "That's braver than most people do in a lifetime." He nodded once, then turned to help one of the caterers move a fallen chafing tray. Back to motion, back to grace. A woman brushed past me and murmured, "You're his mother, aren't you?" I nodded. "You raised a good man." I didn't reply, because I wasn't sure if I had raised him or if he'd finally started raising himself. That night, I drove home alone. No after-party, no flowers in the back seat, just the faint hum of tires on pavement and my hands loose on the steering wheel. There was no music, no noise, just me, just stillness. And for once, it was enough. I didn't expect him to come back over. The reception was still half full. People lingered, sipping champagne they didn't finish. Conversations rose and dipped like waves, unsure of which tide to follow, grief or grace. I stood by the window watching the horizon fold into itself. There was no sunset, just that pale gold hour when everything turned soft and honest. That's when I heard his footsteps. Slow, deliberate, not heavy with shame like they used to be. "Mom," Andrew said behind me, almost hesitant. I turned. His eyes looked different, not hardened, not broken, just clear. He reached into his inner jacket pocket. My breath caught before I even saw them. The pearls, my pearls. They dangled in his fingers, soft and luminous, but suddenly weightless. He didn't say anything at first. He just raised his arms and gently moved behind me, the way he did when he used to fasten my shawl as a boy before church, tugging too tight, but always trying. I felt the cool of the clasp brush my skin as he unfastened the necklace from my neck. Only it wasn't around my neck. It had been around hers. Until now. He stepped back around to face me, held them in both palms. "They belong to the woman who raised me," he said quietly. "Not the one who used me." I couldn't speak. I only reached out and curled my fingers beneath his, accepting the pearls. Not as jewelry, not even as apology, but as a truth finally spoken aloud. A truth that shimmered. He looked away after that, like the gesture itself cost him something to give, but freed him just the same. "I should have seen it sooner," he added. "I didn't want to. I think I just needed something to believe in." I nodded, my voice still absent. It wasn't time for words yet. Some moments require silence to hold them properly. He glanced at the exit, then back at me. "I'm going to stay with a friend for a while," he said. "Take some time, clear my head." I smiled softly, not the kind of smile that says I'm glad you're healing, the kind that says I trust you finally will. He turned to go, stopped. "Do you remember when I was 5?" he said, "and I flushed my Lego down the toilet because I thought it was a boat?" I blinked. "You screamed like the world ended." He chuckled. "You didn't yell. You just gave me your teacup and said, 'Use this instead. It floats better.'" I smiled again. That memory had been buried for years. And yet here it was, rising back like a pearl from deep water. "I forgot who you were for a while," Andrew said, more to himself than to me. "But you didn't forget me." He nodded, and then he left. I stood there holding the pearls long after the doors closed behind him. They were warm now. They smelled faintly of roses and salt and something else I couldn't name. Maybe the truth, maybe memory, maybe the beginning of forgiveness. I didn't put them on again. Not right away. I simply tucked them into the silk pocket of my coat, next to a tissue, a peppermint, and the receipt from the coffee shop where I'd first met Emery and had tried, so foolishly, to connect. The past no longer stung. It just sat beside me now, without asking for more. A server passed by with a tray of untouched eclairs. He paused, offered me one. I declined. I wasn't hungry. I was full, with something else, something lighter. As I walked out into the night air, I felt no need to look back. Let the chandelier flicker behind me. Let the music fade. I had the only thing I came for: my son's clarity, his truth, and, in his own quiet way, his return. The dessert table was barely touched. A small mountain of lemon tarts, pistachio macarons, chocolate-dipped strawberries, all beautifully arranged, perfectly intact. Like the kind of marriage this day was supposed to celebrate. I sat on the far end of the table, porcelain saucer in hand, stirring my tea with the slow rhythm of someone who needed more time than sugar. Andrew joined me. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked over the rows of untouched sweets, like they were evidence of something he wasn't sure he wanted to name. "They look too perfect to eat," he murmured. I gave the faintest nod. Sometimes things should be too perfect to survive the truth. He picked up a fork, but didn't use it, just toyed with the silver between his fingers, tapping it once against the rim of the dessert plate in front of him. Then finally, his voice found its edge. Was this really necessary? The words hovered between us, like steam off my tea. I didn't look at him, didn't offer a yes, didn't defend a number. Just took a small sip, bitter, earthy, grounding, and waited. He added softly, "You could have warned me." I met his eyes then. "Would you have believed me?" He didn't answer. His gaze dropped. We sat in that quiet pause for what felt like a full season. No music now, no vows echoing through vaulted ceilings. Just the clink of dishes being cleared and the whisper of dresses brushing by. "Sometimes," I said, setting my cup down carefully, "love means being the villain. Just for a moment." He turned toward me slowly, eyes narrowed in thought. "That's a terrible line," he said, almost smiling. "But not untrue," I replied. He leaned back in his chair. "I keep wondering, what if none of it had come out? What if Jack never stepped in? What if the audio? Then you would have married someone who called your mother a joke and your grief a weakness." He flinched. "The truth doesn't need to be shouted to hurt." "And what if I was okay with that?" he said suddenly, voice sharp, almost challenging. "What if I just wanted peace?" I inhaled slowly. That's the part no one tells you about peace. Sometimes it's just silence wearing a borrowed dress. "You would have settled for comfort," I said gently. "And in 5 years, 10 maybe, you'd wake up one morning and wonder where your spine went." I paused. "Or worse, where you went." He stared at the lemon tart for a long moment. Then, with a dry chuckle, he said, "That's a very poetic way to ruin a man's wedding day." I smiled faintly. Better one day ruined than a lifetime quietly swallowed. He finally took a bite of the tart. Winced. "Sour," he muttered. I nodded. "Honest things usually are." He looked at me again, this time with less fire, more fog. "I was angry at you," he admitted. "Still am. A little. I know. But I also feel free, which makes me even angrier somehow." I looked out the window at the trees beyond the chapel. Still. Watching. Like they'd seen generations of weddings and warnings before this one. "You're not wrong to be angry," I said. "I never asked you not to be." He was quiet. Then he whispered, "I loved her." "I know." He ran a hand down his face, rubbing the tension from his jaw. "She never loved me back, did she?" I didn't answer. He didn't need one. He already knew. The silence wrapped around us again, but this time it wasn't sharp. It felt like an old sweater, frayed but warm. He reached across the table and touched the edge of my saucer, the gesture small but intimate, like a son finding the woman behind the mother again. I don't know if I'll forgive you for how you did it, he said. You don't have to. But I know why you did. That was enough. We sat there until the candles melted low and the staff began to sweep crumbs from the corners of the room. Just a mother and her son. Not heroes, not villains. Just two people sitting beside the mess of love. And choosing, in small, hard-earned ways, to stay. 1 year later, the garden looked different. It wasn't the flowers. They bloomed as they always had. Fat peonies, wild roses, tall stems of lavender swaying in the late spring breeze. It wasn't even the white chairs or the string lights overhead, though they'd been rearranged to suit the new occasion. What changed was the feeling in the air. Lighter, calmer, less like a performance and more like a promise. Andrew stood by the trellis, laughing. Not the polite, measured laugh I'd grown used to hearing when he was trying to impress someone else. Number. This was full-bodied, unguarded joy, the kind that catches in your chest and makes you thankful to be standing close enough to feel it. Beside him was her. Her name was Lauren. Not a model, not the daughter of a CEO, just a nurse with calluses on her hands and an ease to her smile that told you she didn't come to conquer the world, just to be kind to it. He had introduced her months ago. No secrecy this time. No tension. Just a quiet knock on my door and a simple, "Mom, there's someone I'd like you to meet." I remember that dinner. How she complimented my rhubarb pie without overdoing it. How she offered to help with dishes and actually meant it. How she didn't treat my son like a trophy or a stepping stone, but simply like a man. A flawed, healing man. Today wasn't their wedding. Not yet. It was just a gathering, a birthday, a barbecue. But when he turned and caught my eye across the garden, something passed between us. An unspoken thank you for breaking what needed to break. After the guests had finished their lemonades and the fire pit started to glow, I went back inside for a moment. Upstairs, in the top drawer of my dresser, was the velvet box. I hadn't touched it in a year, not since the chapel, not since I unclasped those pearls from Emery's throat and folded them into my palm like a wound I didn't want to carry anymore. But tonight, they felt lighter. I came back out quietly, the box tucked beneath my arm. Andrew saw me first. He tilted his head, curious. Lauren followed his gaze. And when I reached them, both bathed in the golden hue of string lights and smoke from the grill, I held the box out. "May I?" I asked softly. Andrew nodded. I opened it. The pearls, soft and luminous, lay in perfect symmetry. No longer a weapon, no longer a symbol of misplaced loyalty. Just pearls. I looked at Lauren, then back at my son. "These were a wedding gift once," I said, "but I gave them to the wrong bride." Lauren's eyes widened slightly. She started to protest, but I held up a hand. "They're not for today," I said. "Not yet." Her face softened. Andrew swallowed, but neither spoke. They didn't need to. I closed the box and placed it in Andrew's hands. "When the time is right," I told him, "you'll know." A breeze passed through the garden, lifting the hem of the tablecloths and rustling the candles. I stepped back, watching as he tucked the velvet box into his coat pocket, almost reverently. Lauren slipped her hand into his. No rush, no spectacle, just something real. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was guarding anything. I wasn't protecting, or calculating, or waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was just present. Watching the son I raised find his way, not because I steered him, but because when he finally fell, I let him land somewhere soft. There would be another wedding, maybe. Or maybe just a life quietly built. One pie, one morning, one kind word at a time. Either way, I'd be there. Not with a spotlight, but with a seat in the shade, hands folded, pearls waiting, when love was ready. If you're still here, watching, listening, then maybe this story was never just mine. Maybe it was ours. All of us who gave too much. All of us who stayed too long. All of us who whispered, "It's okay," when it wasn't. I didn't plan to become the woman who walks away. I was raised to stay. Stay married, stay polite, stay quiet, even when it stings. And for years, I did just that. I kept the peace, folded the linens, paid the mortgages, baked the birthday cakes. No one said thank you for. And when my son chose someone who didn't choose me, I told myself to be kind, to be understanding, to be invisible, if that's what kept the family from breaking. But there's a moment, if you've been through it, you know, when the silence becomes heavier than the truth. And you start to wonder, what if leaving isn't the end? What if it's the beginning? When Emery shoved me to the side, not with hands, but with smiles dipped in poison and 1,000 subtle slights, I didn't fight back right away. I waited. Not because I was scared, not because I was weak, but because some storms need to gather before they clear the air. So if you've ever been pushed aside and you stayed silent, you were never weak. You were waiting. And when you rose, you didn't shout. You didn't burn it down. You just opened the door and walked through it like you owned the ground you stepped on. Because you do. I didn't ruin their wedding. I didn't scream or make a scene. I let the truth walk in on its own feet, in the form of a granddaughter brave enough to speak and a son wise enough to finally see. But I also didn't wait to be invited anymore. We're taught that mothers are the glue, that we must hold everything together, even when it cuts us. But sometimes, love means letting things fall apart, so the pieces that matter can find their own way back. And if you're still holding your breath, still hoping they'll see you, let me tell you something I wish I'd heard sooner. You don't need an apology to begin again. You don't need an audience to reclaim your worth. You don't need to be welcomed into know you belonged all along. Tonight, as I stand under the evening sun, its warmth soft across my shoulders, I'm not waiting for anyone to clap. I'm not rewriting the past or chasing ghosts. I'm simply home, in myself, in my peace, in the quiet power of finally choosing me. So, if you've ever had to walk away from something you built, a family, a marriage, a dream, not because it wasn't worth it, but because you were, your story matters too, more than you know.